Dr. Lisa Martinez stared at the encrypted message on her screen for the third time that morning. The words had not changed, but she still could not believe what she was reading. The message was short and came from Earth's High Council. It said that all humans must return to the Sol system within 72 hours. No exceptions. The classification was marked as absolute. Lisa worked on the research station called Meridian Point. The station orbited around a gas giant in the Kepler system. She had been studying alien life forms for the past 8 years. Her team included scientists from 5 different alien species. They had been working together on a project that could change how the galaxy understood biology. Now she had to leave everything behind. She looked out of the large window in her lab. The gas giant below showed beautiful swirls of blue and green clouds. 3 moons danced around the planet in perfect harmony. She had called this place home for so long. Her alien colleagues trusted her. They shared their deepest scientific secrets with her. Tomorrow she would be gone, and they would never know why. Captain Jake Sullivan read the same message aboard his cargo ship called New Horizon. His ship was docked at Centauri Prime, one of the busiest trade stations in the galaxy. Jake had been running cargo between star systems for 15 years. He knew every dock worker, every customs officer, and every merchant on this station. They all trusted him to deliver their goods safely across the galaxy. Jake walked through the corridors of his ship. His crew was already packing their personal belongings. They moved quietly and quickly. No one spoke about what they were doing. The other ships docked nearby belonged to alien traders. Their crews went about their normal business. They had no idea that every human on the station would be gone within 3 days. The Zeltharian dock supervisor named Krixtal noticed the unusual activity. Krixtal had worked with humans for 20 years. He knew their habits and routines. Today, something felt different. Human crews were loading their ships faster than normal. They were taking personal items that they usually left behind during short trips. When Krixtal asked Jake about it, the human captain just smiled and said they were doing efficiency training. Sam Baker stood in his wheat field on the farming world of New Eden. The golden grain stretched to the horizon under 2 orange suns. His wife Helen worked beside him, helping to organize the evacuation of their settlement. They had spent 12 years turning this empty world into a garden. Now they had to leave before the harvest was complete. Their alien neighbors from the Thornian species came to help load the transport ships. The Thornians were peaceful plant-like beings who had taught humans many secrets about growing food in alien soil. They believed the humans were simply moving to a better farming world, in another sector. Sam and Helen could not tell them the truth. They hugged their Thornian friends goodbye and promised to send messages from their new home. Transport ships landed on New Eden every few hours. Each ship carried 50 families away from the world they had built together. The alien colonists watched the ships leave with sadness but no suspicion. Humans had moved between worlds many times before. This seemed like just another relocation for better opportunities. On the distant world of Nexus Prime, the Federation Council continued their daily meetings. Prime Counselor Vex Thara was an ancient being from the Etherian species. She had lived for over 800 years. In all that time, humans had been the most reliable species in the Federation. They fixed problems that other species could not solve. They made peace between enemies. They found solutions that seemed impossible. Vexathera reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Trade was flowing smoothly between 17 star systems. Diplomatic conflicts were being resolved quickly. Scientific research was advancing faster than ever before. The galaxy had never been more stable or prosperous. She did not know that much of this success depended on human work behind the scenes. Dr. Martinez finished packing her research notes into sealed containers. Her alien assistant, a young crystalline named Zeptol, helped her carry the boxes to the transport bay. Zeptol asked why she was taking so much equipment for what seemed like a short trip to Earth. Lisa told him she might be gone longer than expected. She promised to continue their joint research project when she returned. It was a lie, but she could not bear to tell him the truth. Captain Sullivan made his final cargo run through Centauri Prime. His holds were filled with goods bound for human colonies. What the alien merchants did not know was that these were not normal trade goods. Hidden among the regular cargo were pieces of advanced technology, research data, and cultural artifacts. Every human ship leaving the outer systems carried similar, hidden cargo. The evacuation was happening across the entire galaxy at the same time. Human teachers left their alien students in the middle of important lessons. Human engineers abandoned construction projects that were half finished. Human doctors transferred their patients to alien colleagues without explanation. Human diplomats ended negotiations that had taken months to arrange. As the 72-hour deadline approached, the final transport ships prepared to leave. Captain Amy Rodriguez piloted the civilian transport Phoenix Rising from the Outer Rim territories. Her ship carried the last group of human families from the frontier worlds. These were the pioneers who had pushed the boundaries of known space. They were the explorers who had made first contact with 3 new alien species in the past decade. Amy looked back at the star systems they were leaving behind. Her sensors showed normal activity on dozens of worlds. Alien civilizations continued their daily routines. They went to work, raised their families, and pursued their dreams. None of them realized that the species they had grown to depend on was disappearing forever. The last human ship crossed the boundary of Federation space and turned toward home. Behind them, alien friends and colleagues went about their evening activities. They expected to see their human partners again tomorrow. They planned to continue projects that would now never be finished. They trusted in a stability that was already beginning to crack. The galaxy looked the same as it had the day before. The same stars shone in the same patterns. The same planets orbited in the same paths. But something fundamental had changed. The species that had quietly held everything together was gone. Soon the aliens would discover just how much they had lost. 3 weeks had passed since the last human ship disappeared from Federation space. Engineer Zephoth of the Crystalline Consortium stood before a control panel that made no sense. The life support systems on mining platform Omega-7 were failing, in ways he had never seen before. The diagnostic readings showed impossible combinations of errors. According to every manual and training program he knew, these systems should not be able to fail in this pattern. Zephoth remembered Kevin Wright, the human engineer who used to work on this platform. Kevin always fixed these problems within a few hours. He would look at the same diagnostic readings, scratch his head, and then do something that seemed completely wrong according to standard procedures. But his solutions always worked. Now Zephoth realized that he had never actually learned how Kevin solved these problems. He had just watched and assumed it was simple. The mining platform supported 3,000 workers from 7 different species. Without proper life support, they would all have to evacuate within 48 hours. The platform produced rare metals that were essential for building starships. If it shut down, the entire Federation fleet construction program would slow to a crawl. Zephoth tried every solution he could think of. He followed every procedure in the technical manuals. Nothing worked. The systems continued to fail in ways that defied all logical explanation. He began to wonder if Kevin had been doing something that was not written down in any manual. On the diplomatic station Harmony 7, Ambassador Quintar faced his own crisis. A trade dispute between the Meridian Empire and the Silicon Brotherhood had turned into a 3-day standoff. The Meridians were an emotional species who made decisions based on honor and personal relationships. The Silicon Brotherhood were logical beings who only cared about mathematical efficiency and profit margins. Usually, human diplomats would handle this type of negotiation. They had a gift for understanding both emotional and logical viewpoints. They could speak to the Meridians about honor, while showing the Silicon Brotherhood the mathematical benefits of compromise. Without human mediators, the two sides could not even agree on basic facts about the disputed trade route. Quintar had been a diplomat for 60 years. He had negotiated hundreds of agreements between different species, but those negotiations had always included human advisors who seemed to know exactly what each side really wanted. Now he realized that humans had been quietly steering every major diplomatic success for decades. The Meridian delegates pounded their fists on the negotiation table and spoke about ancestral rights to the trade route. The Silicon Brotherhood representatives responded with cold mathematical proofs that the route was most efficiently used by their cargo ships. Neither side could understand why the other was being so unreasonable. What should have been a simple trade agreement became an impossible puzzle. Dr. Thalisa, a Valderan scientist, stared at equations that her colleague Alex Cameron had been working on before his sudden departure. Alex had been developing breakthrough calculations for quantum field manipulation. The research could lead to faster-than-light travel without using dangerous wormhole technology. The equations looked simple on the surface, but Dr. Thalisa could not understand how Alex had derived them. She spent 18 hours a day trying to follow Alex's mathematical reasoning. Every step seemed obvious until she tried to reproduce it herself. Then she discovered that each simple-looking equation contained layers of complexity that Alex had somehow simplified. He had taken problems that stumped alien mathematicians for generations and made them look easy. Dr. Thalisa contacted other Valderan scientists for help. They were known throughout the galaxy as masters of theoretical physics, but when they examined Alex's work, they were equally puzzled. The equations were clearly correct because the experimental results proved they worked. However, no one could figure out how Alex had developed them in the first place. Admiral Kolthak of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet discovered that his military efficiency had dropped by 400%. Response times to pirate raids had increased from 6 hours to over a day. Combat formations that used to move like clockwork now struggled with basic coordination. Ship captains from different species could not agree on tactical priorities. Kolthak had always been proud of his mixed-species fleet. Ships from 12 different alien races worked together as a unified force. He thought this cooperation came naturally from good training and clear command structures. Now he realized that human officers had been the invisible glue holding everything together. Human tactical advisors had served on every major Federation warship for the past century. They did not give orders or make strategic decisions. They just offered suggestions and helped coordinate between different alien command styles. Without their quiet influence, each species reverted to their traditional military doctrines. These doctrines had been developed for fighting other members of their own species, not for working together against common enemies. The food distribution crisis hit 17 star systems at the same time. Cargo ships carrying grain arrived at worlds that needed protein. Worlds with surplus fruit sent their harvests to planets that already had too much fresh food. The careful balance of interstellar food trade collapsed into chaos. Manager Velkara, of the Agricultural Distribution Network, had always relied on human logistics coordinators to optimize supply chains. She thought they were just good at paperwork and scheduling. Now she discovered that humans had been predicting seasonal demands, analyzing population growth patterns, and coordinating between hundreds of different worlds with different climatic needs. The humans had somehow known that the Thornian colonies would need extra grain shipments 3 months before the Thornians themselves realized their crops were failing. They had arranged for protein surplus from the Aquarian fish farms to arrive at industrial worlds, just as worker populations increased. They had managed supply chains across dozens of star systems with different seasons, different crops, and different nutritional requirements. Without human coordination, food began to spoil in cargo holds while other worlds faced shortages. The complex web of interstellar agriculture that had fed billions of beings started to break down. Some worlds began hoarding food supplies instead of participating in the galactic trade network. Banking systems across the galaxy began showing signs of instability. The Nexus Banking Consortium had operated smoothly for 800 years, facilitating trade between species with completely different economic philosophies. Currency exchange rates remained stable. Credit flowed freely between star systems. Investment in new worlds and technologies continued at a steady pace. Financial analyst Morketh noticed unusual fluctuations in currency markets. Exchange rates between different alien currencies began swinging wildly. The mathematical models that predicted market behavior stopped working. Trade agreements that had operated successfully for decades suddenly became unprofitable for one side or the other. Morketh investigated the records and found that human economists had been making tiny adjustments to prevent market bubbles and currency instabilities. They had not controlled the galactic economy, but they had smoothed out the rough edges that occurred when species with different approaches to money tried to trade with each other. Without their subtle interventions, the economic differences between alien species began to create serious problems. On the Federation flagship Unity's Edge, Captain Mordain watched his mixed-species crew struggle with tasks they had performed easily for years. Simple orders became sources of confusion and conflict. The crystalline crew members interpreted commands literally and could not understand why other species added emotional context. The Aquarian officers communicated through subsonic frequencies that many species could not hear properly. Human officers had served as cultural translators on every major Federation ship. They understood how different species thought and communicated. They could rephrase orders so that each crew member understood exactly what was expected. They prevented thousands of small misunderstandings that could have grown into serious conflicts. Now Captain Mordain realized that his crew had never learned to work together directly. They had always relied on human intermediaries to bridge the gaps between their different ways of thinking. Without those bridges, even the most experienced alien officers struggled to coordinate simple operations. The galaxy looked peaceful on the surface. No wars had broken out. No planets had been destroyed. But the careful systems that made galactic civilization possible were beginning to fail in ways that no one had expected. The aliens were starting to discover just how much they had depended on humanity's unique gifts. 2 months after humanity vanished, entire sectors of galactic civilization began falling apart. The problems were not dramatic explosions or alien invasions. They were slow, grinding failures of systems that no one realized depended on human knowledge. Each day brought new discoveries of how much the galaxy had relied on the missing species. The Nexus Banking Consortium faced its first complete financial crisis in 800 years. Currency markets that had been stable for centuries began swinging wildly between different exchange rates. The crystalline species valued mathematical precision in all transactions. The Aquarian Collective based their economy on resource sharing and community cooperation. The Meridian Empire used an honor-based system where personal reputation determined creditworthiness. For generations, these completely different economic systems had somehow worked together. Now, financial analyst Torbeth discovered that human economists had been quietly preventing conflicts between these approaches. They had created mathematical models that satisfied crystalline logic while respecting Aquarian community values and Meridian honor codes. Without human intervention, each species began reverting to their traditional economic models. These models could not interface with each other effectively. Trade between star systems dropped by 60% in just 2 months. Some species began refusing to accept currency from other species. Others demanded immediate payment instead of the credit arrangements that had made interstellar commerce possible. The complex web of galactic trade that had connected 17 star systems started breaking into isolated fragments. Captain Mordain commanded the Federation flagship Unity's Edge with a crew from 12 different species. He had always been proud of how well his diverse crew worked together. Now he watched them struggle with basic coordination that had seemed automatic just months earlier. Crystalline officers interpreted orders with mathematical precision, but could not adapt when situations changed. Aquarian crew members made decisions based on group consensus, which frustrated species that valued individual responsibility. Mordain realized that human officers had been serving as cultural translators for his entire career. They understood how each species thought and communicated. They could explain crystalline logic to emotional species, translate Aquarian group decisions into individual tasks, and help honor-focused Meridians work with efficiency-minded Silicon Brotherhood members. Without human intermediaries, his experienced crew began making mistakes they had not made since their first days in space. The medical crisis hit every major space station at the same time. The Healers Guild had developed treatment protocols that worked for patients from dozens of different species. Crystalline beings required precise chemical treatments. Aquarians needed therapies that considered their collective consciousness. Gaseous species from the nebula regions had completely different biological needs from solid matter species. Dr. Kolshira had worked in multi-species medical facilities for 30 years. She had always assumed that the treatment protocols were developed by committees of alien specialists. Now she discovered that human medical researchers had been the primary innovators in cross-species medicine. They had studied the biology of every known species and found ways to adapt treatments across completely different forms of life. Without human medical knowledge, treating patients from different species became dangerous guesswork. Medications that helped one species could be poisonous to another. Surgical techniques that worked for solid beings could kill gaseous patients. Mortality rates among mixed species crews began climbing for the first time in decades. The galaxy's premier research institution, the Institute of Cosmic Studies, ground to a complete halt. Scientists from 30 different species had worked together on projects that advanced knowledge across all fields of study. Now, research director Kelvana discovered that their greatest achievements had depended on human scientists who connected different alien approaches to scientific inquiry. Crystalline researchers excelled at mathematical analysis, but struggled with creative theoretical leaps. Gaseous beings from the nebula regions had incredible intuitive insights, but could not translate them into systematic experiments. Silicon Brotherhood scientists could build precise instruments, but had difficulty interpreting unexpected results. Aquarian researchers worked well in groups but could not make individual decisions when group consensus was impossible. Human scientists had been the bridge between all these different approaches. They could take a crystalline mathematical proof, combine it with nebula region intuition, use Silicon Brotherhood precision instruments, and organize Aquarian group research projects into coherent studies. Without humans to connect different types of thinking, each species began working in isolation. Scientific progress slowed to a crawl. Educational systems across Federation worlds began failing in ways that no one had expected. Mixed-species classrooms had been common for over a century. Young beings from different species learned together and developed the cross-cultural understanding that made galactic civilization possible. Now teachers discovered that they could not effectively educate students whose minds worked in fundamentally different ways. Professor Yelmara taught at the Central Academy on Nexus Prime. Her classroom included students from 8 different species. Crystalline youngsters learned through mathematical logic. Aquarian children needed group interaction and emotional connection. Meridian youth required honor-based challenges and personal achievement goals. Gaseous students from the nebula regions learned through pattern recognition and intuitive leaps. Human teachers had developed innovative methods to reach all these different types of minds in the same classroom. They created lessons that satisfied logical analysis while providing emotional engagement and personal challenges. They found ways to combine individual achievement with group cooperation. Without human educational techniques, teachers struggled to help their diverse students learn effectively together. The most critical failure occurred in the Federation's exploration programs. For 2 centuries, mixed-species exploration teams had been discovering new worlds, making first contact with unknown civilizations, and expanding the boundaries of known space. These programs had been humanity's greatest passion. Humans loved exploring the unknown more than any other species in the galaxy. Exploration Director Vex Kola reviewed the records and made a shocking discovery. Other alien species had contributed important skills to exploration missions. Crystalline navigators provided precise calculations. Silicon Brotherhood engineers built reliable equipment. Aquarian psychologists helped with first contact protocols. But humans had been the driving force behind every major exploration success. Other species were naturally cautious about venturing into unknown space. They preferred to study new worlds from a safe distance before risking direct contact. Humans were the species willing to take calculated risks that more cautious aliens avoided. They had the curiosity to explore strange phenomena and the adaptability to handle unexpected situations. Without human explorers leading the way, new worlds went unexplored. First contact protocols failed because no other species combined human curiosity with diplomatic sensitivity. The galaxy's expansion, which had continued steadily for 2 centuries, ground to a complete halt. The frontier became a barrier that no one was brave enough to cross. Transportation networks began failing as different species could no longer coordinate their different approaches to logistics. Crystalline schedulers created mathematically perfect timetables that other species found impossible to follow. Aquarian transport cooperatives made decisions too slowly for time-sensitive cargo. Meridian shipping companies refused to work with species that could not guarantee honor-based contracts. Communication systems developed interference problems that alien technicians could not solve. Each species had developed communication technology based on their own biology and psychology. Humans had been the bridge that allowed these incompatible systems to work together. Without human technical knowledge, different species began losing the ability to communicate effectively across interstellar distances. The cascade of failures was accelerating. Each system that broke made other systems less stable. As trade declined, scientific cooperation became harder to maintain. As exploration stopped, new resources could not be found to replace failing systems. As education struggled, young beings grew up without the cross-cultural skills that had made galactic civilization possible. The galaxy had not been invaded or conquered. No external enemy had attacked the Federation. Instead, the removal of one crucial species had revealed how fragile the complex web of interstellar civilization really was. The aliens were learning that their greatest achievement had depended entirely on the species they had taken for granted. 6 months after the human exodus, Prime Counselor Vexithara finally acknowledged what everyone knew but no one wanted to admit. The Federation was collapsing. Systems that had worked perfectly for centuries were failing every day. Trade had dropped to levels not seen since before humanity joined the galactic community. Scientific research had practically stopped. Exploration programs were completely abandoned. The galaxy that had seemed so stable and prosperous was falling apart. Without its human citizens, the Federation Council authorized the largest search operation in galactic history. They called it Project Recovery. The mission was simple in concept but massive in scope. Find humanity and convince them to return. 12 of the Federation's most advanced exploration ships prepared for the journey to the Sol system. The fleet included representatives from every major species and carried gifts, treaties, and promises that the Council hoped would bring humans home. Captain Zarketh commanded the exploration vessel, Stellar Seeker. He had served in the Federation fleet for 40 years and had worked closely with human officers throughout his career. If anyone could convince humans to return, the Council believed it would be him. His fleet included ships with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. They carried enough supplies to establish a permanent base near Earth if negotiations took longer than expected. The journey to the Sol system took 3 weeks. During the voyage, Zarketh studied every piece of information the Federation had about human civilization. The records showed a species that valued cooperation, exploration, and problem-solving above all else. Humans had joined the Federation eagerly and had contributed to galactic society without asking for anything in return. They had seemed happy to serve as mediators, engineers, and explorers throughout known space. What Captain Zarketh could not understand was why such a cooperative species would abandon their galactic family without explanation. The human departure had been too well organized to be impulsive. Ships had been prepared, cargo had been loaded, and entire populations had been evacuated within 72 hours. This level of coordination suggested planning that had taken years or even decades. When the Federation fleet approached the edge of the Sol system, they encountered something that defied all expectations. The entire solar system had been transformed into a fortress. Massive orbital defense platforms surrounded every major planet. Space stations the size of small moons orbited between the planets. Energy barriers blocked every approach route to the inner system. The technology appeared to be centuries ahead of anything the Federation possessed. Captain Zarketh had expected to find the same peaceful human colonies that had existed before the Exodus. Instead, his sensors detected defensive systems that could destroy his entire fleet without difficulty. The humans had not just left the galaxy to hide. They had prepared for war against anyone who might try to force them to return. A single message broadcast on all frequencies reached the Federation ships. Federation vessels, you are entering the Sol exclusion zone. State your business or withdraw beyond the heliopause. You have 1 standard hour to comply. The voice belonged to Admiral Patricia Hayes, a former Federation officer who had served with distinction for 20 years before disappearing with the rest of her species. Admiral Hayes spoke from the command center of an enormous space station that orbited between Mars and Jupiter. The station had not existed during humanity's time in the Federation. Its design incorporated architectural elements from dozens of alien species, but it was clearly built with human engineering principles. The combination created something that was both familiar and completely alien to the Federation observers. Captain Zarketh requested permission to approach for diplomatic negotiations. After several hours of discussion, Admiral Hayes agreed to allow a small delegation to visit the command station. The Federation representatives who boarded the station found themselves in a place that challenged everything they thought they knew about human civilization. The corridors were designed to accommodate beings from every known species in the galaxy. Atmospheric controls could instantly adjust to support any form of life. Gravitational fields could be modified for species that required different environmental conditions. The technology was clearly human in origin, but it surpassed Federation capabilities by generations. Dr. Simon Clark served as Earth's chief science advisor in negotiations with the Federation delegation. He had been a respected researcher during his time in the Federation, known for his work on interstellar physics. Now he appeared to have access to scientific knowledge that made Federation research look primitive by comparison. Dr. Clark explained humanity's position to the stunned alien delegation. The humans had not left because they were angry or dissatisfied with galactic society. They had recognized that their role as universal problem solvers was creating dangerous dependencies throughout the galaxy. Every time humans fixed an alien problem, they prevented that species from developing the skills they needed to solve similar problems themselves. The Federation had become like a family, where the parents never let their children face any challenges. The alien species had grown dependent on human assistance for everything from technical problems to diplomatic negotiations. Without humans to rely on, they could not function independently. This dependency was preventing the entire galaxy from reaching its full potential. But the most shocking revelation came from Director Maria Santos of the newly established Human Development Initiative. During their 2 centuries in the Federation, humans had been conducting secret research that went far beyond their official duties. They had studied every aspect of alien civilization: technology, philosophy, science, culture, and psychology. They had learned from the best that each species had to offer. The result was a synthesis of knowledge that had advanced human civilization by centuries in just a few decades. Human scientists had combined crystalline mathematical precision with nebula region intuitive insights. Human engineers had merged Silicon Brotherhood manufacturing techniques with Aquarian cooperative design principles. Human philosophers had integrated the logical analysis of advanced species with the emotional wisdom of younger civilizations. Director Santos showed the delegation through research facilities that contained technologies beyond Federation understanding. Faster-than-light communication systems allowed instant contact across unlimited distances. Manufacturing systems could create materials with properties that violated known physics. Medical facilities could treat any known disease or injury using techniques that seemed like magic to alien observers. The Federation delegation realized they were not looking at refugees who might be convinced to return home. They were facing a civilization that had transcended its former limitations and no longer needed the galaxy they had once served. Humanity had used their time in the Federation to learn everything they could from alien species. Now they had surpassed their former teachers in every field of knowledge. Captain Zarketh made an impassioned plea for humanity to reconsider their isolation. He described the failures and suffering that had followed their departure. Systems were collapsing. Species could no longer work together effectively. The scientific progress and exploration that humans valued so highly had ground to a halt without their participation. Admiral Hayes listened to every argument with patience and sympathy. She acknowledged the problems the Federation was facing and expressed genuine sadness about the difficulties that alien species were experiencing. But her response was firm and final. Humanity would not return to resume their role as the galaxy's caretakers. The decision had been made after decades of careful consideration. Human leaders had realized that their helpfulness was actually preventing other species from growing and developing. The galaxy needed to learn independence, not continued dependence on human assistance. The current crisis was not a disaster, to be prevented, but a necessary growing process that would ultimately make alien civilization stronger. Director Santos offered one compromise. In 50 years, when alien species had either learned to work together independently or accepted that cooperation was impossible, humanity would reopen communication channels. What happened after that would depend entirely on what the galaxy chose to become during humanity's absence. The Federation delegation departed with empty hands and heavy hearts. They had found humanity, but they had also discovered that the species they remembered no longer existed. The humans had evolved beyond their former role as galactic helpers. They had become something greater and more independent than anyone had imagined possible. The final confrontation did not take place in the depths of space or on a battlefield between warring fleets. Instead, it occurred in the abandoned Federation headquarters on Nexus Prime, where representatives from every known civilization gathered for an emergency session that would determine the future of galactic society. The great assembly hall that had once hosted celebrations of unity and cooperation now echoed with desperate debates about survival and collapse. Elder Kexmari of the Infinite Councils presented the mathematics of galactic decline to the assembled delegates. Her species had existed for over 3,000 years and had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The numbers she displayed were more devastating than any military defeat. Without human intervention, 40% of current Federation technology would become inoperable within 5 years. The complex systems that supported billions of lives across 17 star systems were failing faster than alien technicians could repair them. Trade between species had already declined by 70% since humanity's departure. Shipping routes that had operated successfully for centuries were being abandoned because different species could not coordinate their logistics systems without human intermediaries. Some worlds were beginning to face food shortages, while others had surplus crops rotting in storage facilities. The intricate web of interstellar commerce that had created unprecedented prosperity was unraveling thread by thread. Admiral Korthak stood before the assembly with the weight of military failure heavy on his shoulders. The Galactic Defense Corps had protected Federation space for over 2 centuries. Now he had to admit that their effectiveness had degraded to levels not seen since before humanity joined their ranks. Pirate raids had increased by over 1,000%. Several Outer Rim systems had declared independence rather than rely on Federation protection that could no longer reach them in time. The mixed species military units that had been the pride of the Federation were struggling with basic coordination. Ship captains from different alien races could not agree on tactical priorities. Combat formations that had once moved like precision instruments now stumbled through engagements like confused children. The human tactical advisors who had quietly coordinated between different military traditions were gone, and no other species had learned to replace their unique skills. The Merchant Guild representative, Felkana, described the collapse of interstellar business with barely controlled panic in her voice. Shipping costs had tripled while delivery reliability had plummeted. The human logistics coordinators who had optimized supply chains across dozens of worlds with different seasonal patterns and resource needs had been irreplaceable. Without their careful planning, cargo ships arrived at destinations that no longer needed their goods, while worlds with desperate shortages waited for supplies that never came. Some alien species had attempted to recreate human logistics systems, using mathematical models and artificial intelligence programs. These efforts had failed because they could not account for the intuitive understanding of different species' needs that humans had possessed naturally. Crystalline algorithms were too rigid to adapt to unexpected changes. Aquarian group decision-making was too slow for time-sensitive deliveries. No other species combined the flexibility and efficiency that had made human coordination so effective. But the report that truly stunned the assembly came from the Cultural Preservation Society. Anthropologist Vel Tara had spent months studying the records of human interactions with other species. Her findings revealed that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization had not been their technical skills or diplomatic abilities. It had been their unique capacity to see potential in other species that those species could not recognize in themselves. Human teachers had not just educated alien students. They had inspired young beings to pursue dreams that their own cultures discouraged. Human scientists had not just contributed to research projects. They had encouraged alien researchers to explore ideas that their species considered impossible. Human explorers had not just discovered new worlds. They had given other species the confidence to venture beyond their traditional boundaries. For 2 centuries, human encouragement and collaboration had been driving innovation and cultural development throughout the galaxy. When humans saw a crystalline mathematician struggling with creative thinking, they provided gentle guidance that helped logical minds learn intuitive leaps. When Aquarian artists felt constrained by group consensus, humans showed them how to express individual creativity within collective frameworks. When cautious species feared to take necessary risks, humans demonstrated that calculated boldness could lead to incredible rewards. Without human inspiration, many species were reverting to the limitations that had constrained them before first contact. Scientific research was slowing because alien researchers no longer believed they could achieve the breakthroughs that had seemed possible when humans were their partners. Artistic expression was declining because young beings were not encouraged to push beyond traditional boundaries. Exploration had stopped because no other species possessed the combination of curiosity and courage that humans had shared with their alien colleagues. The delegates made one final desperate attempt at negotiation. A grand fleet of 200 ships from every Federation species approached the Sol system, broadcasting messages of friendship, promises of equality, and pleas for humanitarian assistance. The alien leaders offered to restructure the entire Federation government to give humans equal representation in all decisions. They promised to share their most advanced technologies and scientific discoveries. They even offered to establish human colonies throughout the galaxy with complete autonomy and independence. The response did not come from Admiral Hayes or any military leader. Instead, President Jennifer Walsh spoke from what appeared to be a massive city floating in the space between Jupiter and Saturn. The structure was larger than most planets and clearly designed to support billions of human inhabitants. It represented a level of engineering achievement that surpassed anything the Federation had ever attempted. President Walsh's message was broadcast simultaneously across every planet in the galaxy. Her voice carried both compassion and absolute determination as she addressed the alien species that humanity had once called friends and colleagues. She acknowledged the suffering and difficulties that the Federation was experiencing. She expressed genuine sadness about the challenges that individual alien beings were facing in their daily lives. But her explanation of humanity's position was unwavering. The humans had not left because they were angry or disappointed with galactic society. They had departed because they loved their alien friends too much to continue enabling their dependence. For 2 centuries, humans had served as universal problem solvers, diplomatic mediators, and cultural bridges between species. This help had prevented alien civilizations from developing these crucial capabilities themselves. The problems the Federation faced were not technical failures or diplomatic crises that could be solved by bringing humans back. They were growing pains that every mature civilization had to experience. Alien species needed to learn how to work together without human translators. Their scientists had to discover how to innovate without human inspiration. Their leaders had to find ways to compromise without human mediation. President Walsh announced that humanity would not return to resume their role as galactic caretakers. However, they would not abandon their former colleagues entirely. In 50 years, when alien species had either learned to thrive independently or accepted that effective cooperation was impossible, humans would reopen communication channels. The galaxy would have half a century to prove that it could function without constant human assistance. The final element of humanity's message was the activation of a massive energy barrier around the entire Sol system. This was not a hostile blockade designed to keep enemies out, but an impenetrable boundary that made it clear humanity's decision was final. The barrier would remain in place for exactly 50 years. No communication would be possible during that time. The galaxy would have to face its challenges completely alone. 10 years had passed since that final message, and the galaxy had begun to adapt to its new reality. Some species had indeed learned to cooperate more effectively, driven by necessity to develop skills they had previously relied on humans to provide. The Zeltharian species had become surprisingly effective mediators, though they approached diplomacy with mathematical precision rather than human intuition. The Silicon Brotherhood had developed innovative engineering solutions by studying old human designs and adapting them to their logical thought processes. But many species continued to struggle with independence. The Aquarian Collective had withdrawn from most interstellar contact, unable to make the individual decisions that effective cooperation required. Several former Federation worlds had abandoned advanced technology entirely, returning to pre-contact systems they could understand and maintain without outside help. On a remote research station in the Outer Rim territories, a mixed crew of alien scientists worked desperately to solve a complex physics problem that threatened the stability of their solar system.